Yeah, I'm just gonna come out and say it. The fact this movie happened, that's the crime. That's all I got. The last days of American crime take place in the not-so-distant future when the US government, in response to terrorism, plans to broadcast a signal making it impossible for anyone to knowingly commit a crime. Meanwhile, a man named Graham Brick, played by Edgar Ramirez, teams up with a gangster and his fiancée, played by Michael Pitt and Anna Brewster respectively, to steal $1 billion from the government, disrupt a tower boosting a signal, and make their way to Canada so they can live their lives without being controlled. This was based off a graphic novel of the same name, and I actually had no plans to review it originally. But what caught my attention was the fact that it had the rare distinction of getting a whopping 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And when I hear a movie's that bad, naturally I can't help myself but to look into it and see if it lives up to its reputation. And yeah, there's no beating around the bush here. This movie is a total mess from front to back. Like, I can see some of the appeal, the idea of this oppressive, totalitarian government. There's some 1984 vibes for sure. This could have made for some great social commentary. But this does nothing, like absolutely nothing, with that premise. And given everything that's come out of 2020 so far, it just comes off as woefully out of touch. Honestly, the idea of this controlling government is barely even touched upon. You'd think with a premise as great as that, it would dive deeper into it. But instead, it only acts as a backdrop to an otherwise generic heist thriller. And I mean generic. You have characters who are just bland. Graham, Edgar Ramirez's character, is the only one with any sort of actual character development. His motivation is partially to get revenge for his brother, since this government surveillance played a part in his brother's death. But that's about the bare minimum we get, and we really don't even spend that much time with Graham's brother. So it's almost impossible to get any sort of emotional investment in that. And for everyone else, there's almost nothing to go off of. You have this weird love triangle with Graham and Anna Brewster and Michael Pitt's characters, Shelby and Kevin. Like, Shelby is Kevin's fiance, yet she just willy-nilly goes and sleeps with Graham on a whim. And there's never a reason given to why she's cheating on her fiance. Like, their relationship is never explored. So it's all like it just happens. She's totally one-dimensional. She's treated originally like this neo-noir femme fatale character. She speaks just above a whisper, and she's very coy and mysterious with Graham when we first meet her. But the rest of the movie, after that initial couple of scenes, any sort of mystery or complexity is dropped, and she's treated in this very objectified manner. Like, she sleeps around, and there are scenes where she just gets hit repeatedly and just accepts it, and it's appalling. I just sat there dumbfounded, and I'm like, this is how she's presented? The one major female character in this movie? You do find out one piece of information about her halfway through the movie about some of the people she works with, but it's not like it affects her personality in any regard. It's more just this cog in the machine that just keeps the plot moving forward, and she's otherwise exactly the same from start to finish. On top of that, you have Sharlto Copley in this side plot as this cop. So to back things up, the cops in this movie, they've moved on to other jobs since this new signal renders most of their jobs useless. But law enforcement officials who do decide to stay on the job can receive this implant in the back of their heads so that it doesn't affect them. And he applies for the signal, and from there on out, he's on his own little adventure. And his story runs independently of the rest of the movie. He doesn't interact with the main characters until the third act. And nothing he does otherwise affects the overall plot. But when their paths do cross, it amounts to nothing. The purpose he serves in the final act, it could have just been any random character they meet at that moment, and we would have gotten the same result. It just feels like a massive waste of time giving this character so much attention. And speaking of time, this movie runs at about 2.5 hours long, and boy, do we feel every single minute of it. I mean, we have pointless subplots like Sharlto Copley's filling up a good chunk of the runtime, and on top of that, we are subjected to some excruciatingly long sequences of narration that are just flat. I mean, it is so monotonous, it can just put you to sleep. You could have cut so much out of this, and you could have easily told the story within like an hour and a half, hour 40 tops. Like, I had to watch this in increments to get through. By like an hour and 10 minutes, I was fully tuned out. I was checked out of this movie, and I had to fight to just get to the end. And as far as this movie's tone, that's another thing that just feels all over the place. This goes hand in hand with the lack of any meaningful social commentary, because this will switch back and forth between two wildly different tones. Like, it doesn't know what sort of movie it wants to be. Like, one scene you'll have characters deep in thought, and you'll have this somber, reflective music playing in the background. It's the tone you'd see in a movie that looks to take itself seriously. And given the film's setting, you'd think the film is about to dive deeper into some commentary about society. But every moment where this movie tries to take itself seriously immediately gets canceled out by the scene directly after it. Because you'll get one of two things. You either get these grotesquely over-the-top action scenes that feel like something out of The Purge. Like, there will be scenes that just feel like total chaos, with people getting shot or getting beat up, and nearly every minor character who shows up for like a scene or two is shown as just inherently violent and out of their minds. And when we're not subjected to these action scenes, we instead get these very exploitative sex scenes. Like, there's a scene at the very beginning where Graham and Shelby sleep with one another, and they duck in the bathroom, and there's this remix of the song I Wanna Be Your Dog by the Stooges playing. And if you've ever heard the song, it's just a ridiculous thing to hear in the background of a sex scene. And they're staring each other down and circling the bathroom like they're about to get into a fight. And it's just ridiculous. I laughed so hard at this. It felt like a parody. But this is what the movie does. It just continuously and sporadically switches back and forth between trying to take itself seriously and being mindless exploitation. I was never sure if this was supposed to be a pulpy, dystopian action thriller or something that was supposed to have some meaningful social commentary. And then anytime you think it's about to make a point, it just goes nowhere. So let's talk about the acting, because if there's one big element that really makes this movie a mess, it's that. Not only do we have little to no character development, but the performances barely give any of these characters a personality. I have not seen Edgar Ramirez or Anna Brewster in any major roles before this, so I'm not trying to judge their skills as a whole based on this one movie. But I gotta say, this is not a good first impression for either of them as far as I'm concerned. Ramirez goes for this stoic, Clint Eastwood, man with no name style of action hero, but it just doesn't work. His delivery is completely flat, and every line is just monotonous. And if your protagonist is going to have no emotion whenever he speaks, it's going to be hard for the audience to care as well. We can't have any emotional investment if there's no emotion in the character. The same thing goes for Anna Brewster. Her reactions never match what's actually going on in the scene. Like, if she discovers some big piece of news, her facial expression does not change at all. And there's another scene where she's getting hit repeatedly, and she's just going on having a normal conversation like nothing's happening to her. Everything is just said with the same straight face with no emotion whatsoever. And most of the acting here is in that same vein, but that doesn't work either. It sounds just like this really bad Christopher Walken impression. Like, there'll be awkward pauses when he talks and he'll say the same things twice, but it feels more like silly delivery for the sake of silly delivery. Actors who go for campier line readings like Walken or even say Nicolas Cage, they'll scream and shout and they'll go for this really no-holds-barred approach. But Pitt flails his arms around and he'll say things in a funny voice, but he doesn't really crank that energy up the same way they do. It's just this quirky manner of speaking with like half the energy. And honestly, even if he did put more into it, it wouldn't have helped matters that much. The differing tones conflicted way too often and nothing flowed smoothly in this movie. It's just so out of whack that fixing only one or two elements would make no difference. They would only be canceled out a scene or two later by something else that doesn't flow with the whole rest of the movie. There's just no consistency whatsoever, and it made this movie completely unenjoyable. Yeah, I hated this movie. Everything that it could have done wrong, it does wrong. The acting is god-awful. The character development is close to non-existent. Its 2.5-hour length is insufferable, and its handling of the subject matter is extremely out of touch and almost to the point of insulting. And it feels like two different movies mashed into one, going from pulpy, neo-noir, dystopian thriller to this ultra-serious movie with attempted social commentary, yet having nothing meaningful to say. It's generic in every sense of the word and is a totally joyless experience, and it is completely deserving of that Rotten Tomatoes score. The Last Days of American Crime gets a 0 out of 10. Totally irredeemable. I thought Coffee and Kareem, which is also on Netflix, was going to be the worst movie I saw this year, or at least the worst movie that Netflix put out, but this takes the cake. Worst movie of the year so far, avoided at all costs. So let me know, did for some reason you see The Last Days of American Crime, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you find anything redeemable about it? Because I certainly didn't. Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and give it a share, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you next time.